Today is Monday, December 27th, and this is the ADM Investor Services Weekly Market Kickoff. Please note that the views and opinions expressed here today are solely those of our guests and should not be construed as the views or opinions of ADM Investor Services or ADM. Today's guests are Steve Freed, ADMIS Vice President of Grain Research, and Alan Bush, ADM Investor Services Senior Financial Economist. Steve, starting with the grain markets this morning, grains continue to trade higher. Why, and will this continue?
It's a weather market, and we're seeing dry conditions in parts of southern Brazil and northeast Argentina push soybean and corn prices higher, and meal is near contract highs. We're also seeing dryness down in the southern plains that's helping push the wheat higher, and I think all these markets after the first of the year will continue to trend higher as long as weather is bullish.
Steve, when is the next key USDA report, and what are they expected to say?
January 12th, USDA will give us an update on the final 2021 crop production in the U.S. They'll also give us D1 grain stocks and the first estimate of winter wheat acres. The market is expecting perhaps higher carryouts in corn, beans, and wheat, whether it's bigger crops or less exports, especially in beans and wheat.
Steve, weather, very important. What will you think will be the most important thing for 2022 grain prices? Is it demand? Is it weather? What's your perspective?
It'll be 100% weather. I mean, our demand numbers are pretty solid, but if we have good weather, carryouts will go up and prices will go down. The problem is that when you look at all this snow in Northern California, you see the snow and cold temperatures in Canada and Northern Plains. That's very reminiscent of some analog years when an oscillator was extremely negative, and with La Nina added on to it, those years, which were only three since 1930, had a dry spring and a dry summer in the U.S. Midwest. And so that suggests to me that if this happens, prices should go higher.
Alan, let's turn to the financials for a minute. Looking at the greenback, what are the key areas for support and resistance for the U.S. dollar index?
Well, first of all, the dollar has traded in a broad sideways trading pattern over the last month or so, and it looks like interest rate differential expectations are offering no clear advantage to any of the currencies except for maybe the British pound, where there was a interest rate increase from the Bank of England in a surprise move. But as far as the dollar index, I think will probably remain in this broad range. And I think on the low side, I could see the dollar at 95.50 on the March contract and 96.90. So I think this sideways pattern will continue this year and probably into the first part of next year as well.
Now let's talk about inflation in 2022. What is your outlook for inflation?
Of course, the big story this year has been how high the inflation levels have been, not just here in the U.S., but globally. But I'm inclined to think now that some central banks are talking hawkish, some have actually raised rates. So this may be a bit of a minority view, but I don't think inflation next year, although will still be very much in the news, will be quite as strong as what we have seen in 2021. So I'm looking for inflation to moderate, not to any large degree, just not quite as bad as it has been this year.
Alan, everybody wants to know, what's the outlook for the S&P futures for the balance of this week or this year and going into 2022?
Okay, well, first of all, there are two seasonals that come into play. There's the December seasonal, which shows that the month of December has been an up year 75% of the time over the last 20 years, plus the seasonal in the final week of December has also been bullish. So we have two seasonals coming into play that suggest higher prices. And it looks like now we just have a new record high in the S&P. So I'm not one to fight those seasonals, especially with the fundamentals that I'm looking at remain bullish on balance. So I would look for higher from where we are this year and with some likely follow through to the upside next year.
I have another question for both of you. And Steve, I'm going to start with you. From your perspective, what was the most surprising or interesting move in market move in 2021? And what market or markets do you think might be newsmakers for 2022?
Well, I think the Omicron and the Delta virus was probably the biggest news as far as the grains are concerned, and the impact that had on supply chains, job shortages, and just some issues as far as higher prices due to less supply versus the demand. I think for, again, 2022, we're looking at some lofty prices, $13 beans, over $6 corn, and $8 wheat. And they'll, we tend to make February lows. We don't usually rally into the month of January and February, depending upon South American weather. And then we make either April highs or, if the weather's dry, July 4th highs. There have been a few years in which we actually made highs after July 4th. So I think this year is going to be 2022, extremely volatile year because of weather.
Alan, from your perspective, what was the most surprising or interesting market move in 2021? And what market or markets do you think might be newsworthy for 2022?
Well, I think the most interesting market has been the stock index futures that have continued to advance despite a wide variety of geopolitical issues, including, as Steve mentioned, the COVID situation, very much a negative as far as what it has done to the global economy. And yet stock index futures continue to advance. Could be that low interest rates may have had a lot to do with that. And as far as looking into next year, I think the thing that many analysts and traders will be looking at is just how aggressive the Fed will be in raising rates. They're on schedule to eliminate the taper early next year, or eliminate the quantitative easing program with their tapering. Also, it appears that the Fed will be raising its Fed funds rate 2 to 3 times. So I think the Fed will be probably very much in focus, and just this, traders wanting to see just how aggressive they will be in withdrawing the accommodation and becoming more hawkish.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to both of you. Remember, the news and opinions expressed today on this video are solely those of our guests and should not be construed as the views or opinions of ADM Investor Services or ADM. If you'd like more information about our brokerage services, would like to speak to one of our experts about managing your risks, or would like to open a trading account, please visit www.admis.com.